Hey bag ladies and bag dudes, I'm Sarah Lawson from Soul Sweetness. Thanks so much for joining me for Ask Sarah, my weekly Q&A chat. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful and relaxing day today. Hopefully you got some sewing in. I'm so happy that you're joining me for the show. I'm really excited to be here, and I thought I'd try something a little bit different today. But first of all, we wanted to post a comment up on the screen that we saw while we were getting ready for the show from Anne. Anne said, was just reading Pat Sloan's New Year's Day post about her word for the year. Does anyone here choose a word for the year? My 2019 word is complete. So I thought that was really interesting. I saw that comment come through a few minutes ago, so I was able to get my thoughts together and come up with my word for 2019. And I think my word for 2019 will be the word now. It's a really short and simple word, but thinking of how I've been feeling the last, maybe the last few weeks of 2018, I feel for me now is an appropriate word. And maybe you agree with me, but the reason I chose now is because I feel like over the years, or at least maybe this has just been my mind frame, like I feel like we always tell ourselves, all right, if I accomplish this, then I can do that, or if I make so and so amount of money, then I can buy this or go to this place. But the reason I thought that now was appropriate, and I was thinking about this recently in regards to the riding lessons that I'm taking. I just started taking 2 riding lessons a week because I thought and it applies to the word now because if I don't do something that I really want to do now, then when might I do it, in 20 years or 10 years? And so I thought now was really appropriate. And I don't intend for now to be a selfish word like I need something that costs $1 million. Let's get that now. I just mean that there's certain things in life or goals that are certainly attainable, and you shouldn't wait. You should just go for it. Maybe it's a particular sewing project that you wanted to make, or visiting a friend or family member, something like that. I think now is certainly appropriate. Deborah says, my mother had a chalkboard in the kitchen that said, do it now. I always think about that during my procrastination stages. So looks like Deborah agrees with me, but I think that's a great word, and I'm going to keep it sort of in the forefront of my mind for 2019. I see some other words. Clyde said organize. So I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone else is choosing for their word. I'm going to look through the comments after the show. Okay, so I also wanted to thank you. Danny reminded me before we went live that we just passed 40,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. So thank you so much for subscribing. We really, really appreciate that. I was thinking how many subscribers we had at the very beginning of 2018, and Danny said it was around 5,000. So I feel like that's great progress, and I feel like the number really doesn't matter as much if people are not participating and enjoying the shows and watching either live or the recording sometime during the week. It could certainly be a much smaller number, but if all of those numbers counted as far as active viewers, that would be amazing. But 40,000 subscribers, we really appreciate you so much, and thanks for being part of the community. So my idea for tonight's show is something a little bit different. I thought we'd do kind of get to know you 20 questions, meaning I'll ask 20 questions. Hopefully you'll join me in participating and answer these questions yourself by typing in the comments. So if you normally cast the show to your TV, if you're watching on YouTube, you might want to grab your cell phone or your tablet so that you can participate with us. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the comments or the replies to the questions. We do have a little bit of a delay on the live show, so Danny's going to do the best he can in regards to getting some of the answers to the questions up on the screen. Hopefully we can make that happen, but we'll see about that. So I'm going to get started. Again, I'm just going to read out 20 different questions. I'll answer them myself, and hopefully you'll also want to answer these questions in the comments. Some of them are sewing related, and some of them are just likes, dislikes, that kind of thing. So let's kick it off with question number 1. I'd like to know, how old were you when you learned to sew? So I first learned to sew when I was in the 3rd grade. My mom taught my friend and I how to sew, just some basics, and we made 2 different projects. We met once a week for a few weeks, so not a whole huge amount of time. but we made 2 projects out of knit fabric. So we made a drawstring bag out of knit fabric, which today I probably wouldn't use knits for a drawstring bag. And we also made a garment. So I made a top and my friend made sort of a tunic. So it was like a longer top out of the knit fabric. Basically looks like a t-shirt, but longer. I see some comments already coming through, 13, 10. Anyway, when we finished making the garment, the next day at school was what was called a dress down day. So we were allowed to wear whatever we wanted. So I wore my handmade garment, and I was expecting my friend to show up at school wearing her handmade garment, and she was just wearing her regular clothes, and I was kind of disappointed. But I think my friend's mom thought that her handmade garment wasn't maybe the best quality or the best made, since it was made by a 3rd grader, but I thought we did great. And I'm so thankful that my mom let me wear mine to school, because I was really proud of it. And even though I learned how to sew in the 3rd grade, I didn't start sewing again until I was an adult, until I had my kids. So there was quite a huge gap in between, but I'm so thankful that it stuck with me. So I see a lot of different ages coming through. I thought that was really interesting. And again, after the show, I'm going to pop back through the comments and see some of the other replies to the questions. So my second question is, where do you live currently? So I live in Chicago, Illinois. You probably know that. I've always lived in the Chicago area. I grew up in the suburbs. So my parents still live 20 minutes away from where we live now. Haven't gotten a chance to live in any other states. But my dad grew up in the Chicago area. My mom was actually born in Austria, so she came over here. My grandparents came over here when she was a baby, so that's a little bit of a backstory. But they decided to live in Chicago as well when they moved here from Austria. And I guess it's all that I've ever known, and I feel like a really strong connection to Chicago. Like, I feel proud that I live here. Maybe you feel the same way about where you live, or where you currently live, or maybe where you've lived in the past. Yeah, so all things Chicago, like, I'm really, really attached to. See a lot of other things coming through. California from Nicole, Lou's from Surrey in the United Kingdom, and Carrie lives in Washington. All right, so my third question is my second sewing related question. What types of sewing projects do you like to make? So I feel like I like to dabble in a little bit of everything. Of course, bags are my strongest sewing related task. I also like making quilts, garments. I probably make a couple, maybe 1 to 2 quilts a year, depending on what else is going on. I haven't made a garment in a while, but I really, a couple years back, I was really interested in garments and garment fitting. So I dedicated a lot of time to learning how to adjust patterns, because generally patterns that you buy at the store are made for a certain body type or a certain height. And if you're different than that, median, then you need to make adjustments. So for me, I generally always have to make a small bust adjustment, which means taking extra fabric out of the chest area. Sometimes I need to make adjustments for height, but not always. But that bust adjustment is something that I start off with in a garment no matter what. I don't even check the original pattern for fit. I just do the small bust adjustment right off the bat. Other things that I like to do that are in the sewing realm, I love English paper piecing. I like foundation paper piecing. I'd like to get a little bit more into applique, but I feel like it's a little bit of an obstacle for my personal sewing machine, because my sewing machine is straight stitch only, and for applique, I'd like to maybe try applique with a blanket stitch, or stitching by hand so you don't see the stitches. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll get more into the applique. All right, so my fourth question is, what is your favorite book? So I have a couple favorites that I wrote down to tell you about. So the first one is The Storyteller. It's called The Storyteller by Jodi Picoult. I had to look up the pronunciation of her last name, because there's certain words in my head where I think I know how they're said, and clearly it's wrong. So I looked up the pronunciation of her last name before the show. I'm really into World War II, Holocaust era type of books, and so The Storyteller is that. My second favorite book is called The Time Traveler's Wife, and the author of that book is Audrey Niffenegger, and she's actually an author from here in Chicago. And a funny story about that, this book is, I'm not sure how old it is, maybe 15 years or so old. When I was in college, I took a lot of art classes. That was my concentration. And there was another school in Chicago, which I didn't know that she taught there, but the author of this book, Audrey Niffenegger, taught at Columbia College in Chicago, which I did not go to Columbia College. I went to a different college in Chicago, but we had an assignment my last year of college, and we had to interview a professional artist. And I didn't know who to pick, but I chose someone who was recommended to me by a friend. But in the meantime, my instructor, because I was really into printmaking, and that's this author's focus as well, because she's also an artist. My instructor wanted to suggest that I interviewed this author, who is also a printmaker. And in the meantime, I had already chosen this other artist, but I kind of like I felt regretful about my choice because this is the author of my favorite book, and I could have interviewed her for my art class because she's also a professional artist. So, gosh, I would so love to meet her in person, but that clearly has passed me by since I made the wrong choice in my selection for the artist interview. But anyway, my next question is, what sewing tool are you surprised to use as often as you do? So something that you use all the time, but you wouldn't have expected that you would use it so much. So my favorite, my most oft used sewing supply is this flatter spray. It's a starch alternative spray, and I use it all the time when I'm prepping my pattern pieces. And I could very well just use the water from my iron because my iron is really trustworthy. I use the Singer Expert Finish iron, and it doesn't leak water even after all these years. So I could very well use the water when I'm ironing my pattern pieces to get creases and crinkles out. But I refuse to use the water because I love using the spray so much, and I go through so many bottles. It comes unscented, but I like the fig or the pineapple scents. But that is my most useful sewing tool that I would not have expected that I would have used so much. All right, let's jump over to question number 6. And that question is, who is your favorite musician, band, or singer? So my answer to that question is, I don't know if this is just an emotional tie from my younger years, but the first favorite band that I wrote down for this question is Jimmy Eat World, which is sort of a kind of a punk band, at least from several years ago. One of my current favorites is a singer called Alice Merton, and she's a great singer-songwriter. I just like her songs are very upbeat. Violet loves them as well. And yeah, those are probably my 2 favorites. I saw Alice Merton earlier this year. She was opening up for another singer in the area, so it was really fun to see her in person. Bonnie says Led Zeppelin, Nicole's Grateful Dead, Gina says Karen Carpenter, and Sheila has her favorite as Bette Midler. I also see Sandy's got Queen on there. I'm assuming, Sandy, if Queen was your choice, that you saw that recent movie, Bohemian Rhapsody. I didn't get a chance to see that yet, but definitely still want to see that movie. All right, so question number 7 is, what is the oldest sewing project you made that you still use to this day? So this was an easy answer for me, and I pulled it out just so that I could show you. So this is, I think, the second quilt that I ever made, and it's just 10-inch squares, which is also known as a layer cake. So a layer cake is a stack of 10-inch squares from the same fabric line. So all the fabrics are coordinated. They're all pre-cut at the 10-inch size. And this particular fabric line was designed by Momo for Moda Fabrics. And I just pieced the 10-inch squares. I didn't do anything fancy. And the backing of this quilt is like a pink dimple dot minky. So we use this quilt to this day. It's our favorite quilt to use on the couch. And I didn't actually quilt it. I just sewed the quilt top right sides together with the minky and then turned it right side out. And I didn't even top stitch, looks like. I must have top stitched the opening, but yeah, very basic. I did put a lot of time into the quilt, but I didn't put a lot of features since it's not quilted. But it's really warm and comfortable, and it's a huge quilt, and we love it, right, Danny?
Absolutely, my favorite.
He says it's his favorite. All right, let's see what it's. Teresa says, the second quilt I ever made, the first still isn't quilted. I find that's the case with some of my quilts too. I have some half-finished projects. I think I have 1 or 2 quilts that I actually sent off for long arming, and I never finished, meaning I never sewed the binding on, which is kind of sad and disappointing. I'm disappointed in myself. Janice says placemats that she still uses. So it's good to know. Sarah says handmade grocery bags. It's good to know that some of our early projects we're still using. We're not just making them for no reason, I suppose. Karen says a quilt that I made for my husband about 30 years ago. Wow, that's awesome. That's fantastic. All right, so my eighth question is, what is your favorite movie? I wrote down two favorites. The first one, horse related, is called Sea Biscuits. The reason I love that movie is because not only does it have horses in the movie, but I feel like the focus is on the characters, the trainer, the jockey. There's a lot of focus in the movie and in the book on the characters, which I liked a lot, and I felt really attached to them. And the second favorite that I wrote down is a movie from a few years ago. It's called The Age of Adeline. It's a romance movie, and I really like the movie, not just for the romance part, but I also like the garments in the movie. The main character is, without spoiling the ending or anything like that, the main character is a woman who never ages, and so she's wearing clothing from a very long time ago, and she looks very hip and modern, even though she's wearing this vintage clothing. She's very fancy in the movie, so love that movie. Audrey says Goodwill Hunting is her favorite. Catherine, An Affair to Remember, and Julie says The Princess Bride and Young Frankenstein are her favorites. Okay, next question is a super easy one. What's your favorite color? My favorite color is green, although I feel like when I'm looking at fabrics, any fabric with turquoise in it or aqua tends to catch my eye. But my favorite color is green. When I was a kid, I super hated pink, and I wouldn't want any clothes or nothing to have any pink on it. But I found that over time, I do enjoy using pink in my projects, and I like especially pink with turquoise. So I've changed my mind over these years about the color pink. Karen says her favorite color is red. Carol's favorite color is also green, and another vote for red from Sue. Okay, let's see. What's next on the list? Oh, I wanted to know if you collect anything. So besides fabric, obviously we're all fabric collectors here if we're watching this show. But do you collect anything interesting? So my friend Tamara collects teacups, which I thought was pretty cool. When I was a kid, I collected stamps, especially stamps with horses or animals, so like stamps from all over the world. I'm not really sure what happened to my stamp collection. Maybe my mom still has it at her house. I'm not sure. Not sure about that. I also collected Breyer horses, which Violet also collects them. So Breyer horses, I pulled a couple down, are sort of realistic looking, hard plastic. So this is one of mine, and this is one of Violet's. Hers actually came with a little saddle on it, but most of them are just the horse. I actually have some that were quite pricey, and I have some that were actually signed also, which were kind of cool. They're packed away right now, so I couldn't pull any more out, but those were the Breyer horses that I collected. And Murphy is collecting thimbles, Linny's collecting turtles, and Clovis collects books. So lots of different choices for things to collect. Ariette's collecting small glass animals, although not anymore. And Tammy collects sewing machines. So Tammy, I'm really curious, since you collect sewing machines, how many sewing machines you have, because I know some people have quite large collections of sewing machines. I'd be very interested to see a photograph of your collection of sewing machines. Okay, so question number 11 is something about sewing that you hate. We can't love everything about our hobby, so let me know, what is something about sewing that you hate? So I have two things. The first one is a messy sewing room. Whenever my sewing room's messy, as it is currently right now, it's always hard to get in the mindset of working, and I feel a little bit claustrophobic. You might have seen my sewing room studio tour on Christmas Day, but there's not a lot of space in here, even though it probably looks like that on camera, but there's not. So when there's a mess, I have to like step over things. When the kids come over in here to ask me a question, if I have things on the floor, they're stepping on my projects or fabric. So I hate a messy sewing room, and I also hate not having a zipper color that matches the project that I'm working on, because I feel like the zipper color needs to be pretty close, but sometimes that's not always possible because there's not zipper colors in like 350 colors or anything like that. Adrian says, I hate ripping out stitches. And Shelly says, cutting and ironing fabric. True story, I actually enjoy the process of cutting and ironing. I usually try to do it the night before I start working on the project. And it's just, I feel like it's sort of dipping my feet into the project during that cutting and fusing process. rather than jumping in with something hard, I get to start with something easy, which is cutting out fabric and fusing. Even though it usually takes me a few hours, it's kind of a relaxing process for me. At least I think, for me to go through. I know not everyone feels the same way, but that's just me. LR says dropping pins. She hates dropping pins. Yeah, I could see how that would be not a good thing. Next question is, what is your favorite TV show? I wrote down four of them. I have a lot of favorites. My number one favorite, I would have to say, is Catastrophe. You can watch that over on Amazon Prime. It's streaming. It's a comedy set in the UK, and I just think it's hilarious. Mrs. Maisel is also one of my favorites. You can watch that also streaming on Amazon Prime. When Danny and I first started seeing each other, he introduced me to Law and Order SVU, which is another of my favorites. It's one of those TV shows where I like to watch when I'm sewing because I don't have to pay close attention. I've watched each of the Law and Order SVU episodes multiple times, so I can kind of, it's just comforting. I'm familiar with the characters, and I enjoy watching those when I'm sewing. Also, I enjoy Castle. I like kind of murder mysteries, and I see Dee Gregory says Timeless is her favorite show. Arietti, Stargate SG-1. Priscilla says So Sweetness Now. So Sweetness Now. Thanks so much, Priscilla. The Good Doctor. I haven't watched that yet. I heard that one was really good. Game of Thrones. We enjoy Game of Thrones in this household as well. Shelley says Outlander, Doctor Who, Bull, and Criminal Minds. Nicole says The Goldbergs. Oh, I do enjoy The Goldbergs also. Rose says Project Runway and Grey's Anatomy, so lots of favorites. I'm actually going to look through those, especially. I'm going to hyper focus on the TV shows after the show because I enjoy picking up a new TV show, so I'm going to check your comments after the show for any new shows that I can add to my watch list, I guess you could call it. Question number 3 is, which celebrity, if you could invite any celebrity to your house for dinner, who would it be? I thought long and hard about this one, and my choice for celebrity I would like to invite for dinner is Kristen Bell. You might be familiar with her if you watch the TV show called The Good Place, or years ago she was on the show called Veronica Mars. And the reason I chose Kristen Bell is I listened to her husband's podcast. Dax Shepard has a podcast called Armchair Expert. I'm not really a podcast person, but I started listening to his, and I really enjoy. He asks thoughtful questions of his guests. He has celebrity guests on, and his wife is Kristen Bell. So I listened to his very first podcast episode with Kristen Bell, and she just seems like a super cool person, very thoughtful person. It seems like she cares a lot about other people, especially people in need. So that's why I chose Kristen Bell. I see Carol says Matt Damon. I'm not sure if maybe for the physique. Chris says Tim Allen. Lori says Harrison Ford. Kathleen says Oprah or Michelle Obama, and Denise says Walter Cronkite. So very interesting choices. Reese Witherspoon would be also very interesting to meet. She does a lot with recommending books, and she just seems like a very accomplished person. Katharine Hepburn from Barbara. So lots of great choices there. Shannon says Jessica Alba because of her work in her company for natural products. Yeah, that's a very interesting choice as well. Barbara says Dolly Parton and Sam Elliott. We actually got a chance to go to Dollywood over the summer, and Dollywood's owned by Dolly Parton, and there's just traces of Dolly Parton all over the park, and you can tell her heart's really in it, and her heart's really in the area. So yeah, fantastic choices for the celebrities. Question number 14, if you could purchase something expensive that's sewing related, what would it be? So something sewing related but expensive, what would be on your wish list? I had to think about that for a while. I'm very happy with my sewing machine, so I wouldn't want a more expensive sewing machine necessarily. I'm sure Danny would vote for an embroidery machine because he's really taken with the 10 needle embroidery machines, but I don't know. I guess this is probably a really selfish answer, but a long arm, I'd probably not use a long arm very much, but I always thought it would be cool to have one to quilt my own quilts, but I don't make very many quilts, and so that's why I feel like it's kind of a selfish choice. Sarah says an embroidery machine. Barbara says a Juki. Teresa says a long arm. Sue says industrial machine. That's a good choice too. I get asked about industrial machines once in a while, but I don't have room to have an industrial machine with the the table and all that. Gina says a koala sewing cabinet. I have eyed some of those koala sewing cabinets or the sewing desks or tables. Again, don't have room, but it would be nice if I had like a huge, like if our whole first floor could be devoted to the sewing room, like I'd get all the things, the long arm, the koala tables, all that stuff. Question number 15, what is something you would change about yourself if you could? For me, this was an easy one. I have two answers to that. The first one, when I was growing up, I always, don't laugh at me, but I always wanted to have a bigger chest because I thought that's what would make me more likable or popular. But now I realize that really this, what my chest looks like has really nothing to do with who I am. And I'm assuming Danny would be the only one that would care about anything like that. And I realize that I'm okay with that now because running and horseback riding, it might be a little bit more challenging if my chest was larger. Another realistic one, I'd like sometimes to be more witty or chatty if I needed to be. Like if I was in a social situation where I would need to like have some witty banter, sometimes I would like to be able to come up with things on the spot or to remember what words I'm thinking about without having to pause. Like sometimes on the live shows especially, I'm trying to think of a certain word or I would like to fill in like an awkward silence by being chatty, but I'm just not that person. And so I deal with on the live shows like outlines and being prepared, and that's how I show up for the show. Carla says, wish I could play softball again. Lois says she would change her age. Jacqueline said confidence and focus to run a successful business. So hopefully that question didn't make you feel down. Chris says, I'm tall, I'd like to be shorter. I know there's always something that we'd like to have different. When I was very young, like I wished I didn't have freckles, but I'm totally fine with that now. So yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Number 16, question number 16 is what sewing tool do you use that was not originally meant for sewing? So there's a couple of things I wrote down. This first one is not one that I actually use, but I thought it was funny because some people do use vodka mixed with water for when they're ironing. So they fill a spray bottle with vodka and water, kind of like how I do with my flatter spray. So that's not my answer, but I thought it was funny, so I wanted to say it. I love using washi tape. You've probably seen in my sewing videos that I have usually a pink strip of washi tape on the bed of my sewing machine. That's to mark the seam allowance. So I use washi tape's probably the one that I use often. I'll take the tape off and stick down a new stick. Charlie says chopsticks and foam tape. Sheila uses tweezers. And Pamela says carpenter's tape. Sandy, iron. And Betty says hemostats. Oh yeah, hemostats is a good one for turning things right side out. Lori uses a letter opener. Curious, Lori, if you use that for poking out your corners. And Carla says a bar of hotel soap for marking. Oh, that's a great idea. I never would have thought about that. Debbie uses freezer paper. So there's a lot of good ones for that one. Danny's going to put another one up on the screen. Kathy says wire cutters to shorten zippers. Oh, that's a good one also. Definitely have used that before to shorten zippers or to take off the metal teeth. Question number 17. What's one thing you'd rather pay someone to do than do yourself? So I was anticipating some funny replies to this particular question. I have 3 things on my list for this. Things I would pay someone else to do that I would not like to do myself. I'm sure some of you will also have these 3 things on your list. Mine is fold laundry, go grocery shopping for me, and clean my house. Was kind of tentative on my list. In theory, I would like someone to clean my house for me, but probably not because I would like to know where all my things are and I'd like to put them. I'm not a control freak, but I would like things in certain spots that would make things easier for me. Karen says house cleaning. Shelly says mow the lawn. Alicia says clean my house. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I have some friends that have house cleaners come over and it sounds really great. I'm just not sure if I'm not sure if I can make it to have someone else put my stuff in its place. It would be nice to have someone clean the bathroom though. Yeah, that's kind of gross. All right, question number 18 is what is something you'd love to do if only you were good at it? So I'm assuming this is something that in your head sounds like you would love to do it. It would be a great idea, but you're just not good at that. So something I would like to do if I was good at it would be to write a novel. So I feel like I'm a strong writer, but I feel like I'm just not creative that way to write a novel. Like if I could write a novel that would be like 100th as good as the Harry Potter books, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, a writer would be awesome for me. Question number 19, let's skip over to that. What's
Whoa, you
something...
didn't go to comments at all.
Oh, okay. Oh, Carol would like to sing. Yeah, I would like to sing also. That sounds good. Phyllis also says writing, so Phyllis agrees with me. Kristen says singing. Okay, so singing, writing, playing the piano. Oh, lots of singing in there. Barbara says paint. Oh, that would be an interesting thing to do well, if I could, paint. Kathy says draw, paint, dance, lots of things. All right, question number 19. Something weird or unexpected about yourself that people might not know about you. I wrote down, I think since I'm so shy, people would not expect that I was a cheerleader for several years while I was in school. I was not very acrobatic, but I was the girl like at the top of the pyramid. I enjoyed doing that, and it was fun, and it was like exhilarating for me, and I felt like I did a good job at cheerleading even though I'm a quiet person. I was really into, we went to competitions and all that, so I was really into that. But once I got to high school, the high school that I was at really didn't have any history of competing cheerleading wise, and it was very simple, and I was just not into that as much, so that's why I got out of it. But I think being a cheerleader is something that would be unexpected. Are there any good ones coming through, Danny? Let's see. Adrian says, I love jellyfish. Oh, that's very interesting. Denise says, I'm an introvert. I am as well, Denise. Renee says, I can sew and rebuild cars. Oh, rebuilding cars sounds awesome. Christine says, I took auto mechanics through high school. Anita says, I can write backwards and upside down. Very interesting. I'm going to let Danny put some more of these on the screen. Yvonne says, I was into aerobics. Chris says, I ride motorcycles and mountain bikes. Not too many women do. That's awesome. I was a firefighter and an EMT. Carla says, I'm an accountant, TSA certified screener, and volunteer with local PD and sheriff's office. Wow, that's a lot of things there. Elisa says, I can do 50 push-ups. I cannot. I can just do like girly push-ups like on my knees. So 50 certainly not for me. Janice says, heavy equipment operator. Fascinating. Teresa says, I can use a bullwhip. Carrie says, lived in France for 2 years. Oh, that must have been amazing. Barbara says, I mud bog and rock crawl. Wow, these are like really... Barbara says, I make handmade soap. These are fascinating hobbies. Bonnie says, I took tap dance lessons for 15 years as an adult. Sharon was a figure skater when I was young. Wow. Very awesome. All right, so let's get to the last question on the list. It's sewing related. Question number 20 is, what is the most ambitious sewing project you would like to be able to say you made? So I guess your bucket list or what have you projects. So I have two things written on here. You may be familiar if you're a quilter with the Dear Jane quilt. I would love to make that one day. I probably won't just because of all the different, I know there's applique and all sorts of techniques in that, but the Dear Jane quilt would be amazing to make one day. Also, I know I'm already married, but like it would be really cool to go through the process and the learning to make a wedding dress. I know it's very intricate, lots of different things, depending on what the dress looks like, come into play. But I would love to know how to do that. Also, I think it's really interesting, the whole area in regards to wedding dresses of alterations. I would really love to sit in for a couple days with someone who alters wedding dresses and see what that process is like, because it seems so very intricate and specific, especially with people changing size as far as weight before the wedding and things like that. Donna says the Cumberland backpack. Sandra says design my own handbag. Eileen says complete the Tula Nova quilt. I would also like to make the Tula Nova quilt. Cindy says a kaleidoscope quilt. Arlene says I'd love to make a wedding dress also. And Amanda says a king-size quilt of the whole Zelda map from the original game. Wow, that sounds like a very lofty goal. Lori says complete a Sarah Lawson bag, all of them. I like that one, Lori. And Betty says making my niece's wedding dress. Very nice. All right, what else? Emerita says quilt and a jacket, or possibly a 2-in-1, a quilted jacket. That would be really cool. Robin says you can make a wedding dress for Violet. I don't know if she'll let me. I would certainly love to do that. Clovis says a wall hanging for Nancy Zeman, and Dawn says make Victoria Finley Wolf's double wedding ring quilt. Oh, I would also like to make that one as well. Kay has a very realistic goal. Make a quilt for each child and grandchild. I like that one a lot too. And Gwen says, I want to make a Mariner's Compass quilt and free motion quilt it myself. So I love seeing those goals. Let me see how we're doing on time. Wow, that took up a lot more time. It was funny. Danny and I were talking before the show, and Danny was like, I don't know, like these 20 questions, that's going to go by really fast. But somehow I was able to talk through those 20 questions in like our normal time slot. And I really appreciate all of you piping in with your comments as well. That would be really interesting to go back and look at later in the week and see what everyone's answers to the questions were, especially something weird and unexpected about yourself. I'm looking forward to that one. And probably the last two, to me, were the most interesting questions out of all of those. So I really enjoyed getting to know all of you better. Oh, Mark says, when I got married, all the bridesmaids made their own dresses. Oh my gosh, that sounds really amazing, Mark. Thanks so much for piping in with that. All right, so I guess that's it. That's it for 20 questions. Thanks so much for participating, and feel free, if you're watching the recording of the live chat later on in the week, feel free to jump in with your answers as well, because I know it will be enjoyable to read all of those answers after the fact as well. All right, Danny's reminding me, if you enjoy our live shows, our sewing videos, and our bag making videos, please feel free, if you're watching on Facebook, to hit the share button right now. Share this sewing video with your other sewing friends on Facebook. I hope, if you're not already, if you're watching on YouTube, if you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel just so you can be notified of all of our live shows and our other videos. I also wanted to remind you that I've been uploading some of our shorter bag making tutorial videos recently. So if you've missed some of those on the live shows, they're available in shorter, about 10-minute chunks, such as the infinity scarf, the tapered corner video from the other day, a couple weeks back, the rolled handle. So if you're looking for any of those videos, you can either find them on my website under the tutorials tab. Oh, Tamara says I can deliver babies. That's awesome.
You save money next time.
If you're looking for any of those shorter tutorial videos, you can find those at sewsweetness.com under the tutorials tab for bag making. You can also find them on the YouTube channel under the bag making techniques section of our YouTube channel. And those are just quick little tutorial videos for bag making techniques, adding zipper pulls to zippers, making zipper pockets, so all sorts of things. And we're adding more every week, because usually I do a demonstration on our Social Sunday shows, and we record those little segments to upload those as separate videos after the fact. So be sure to check those out if you've missed any of those. So thank you so much for joining me for Ask Sarah on this New Year's Day. I really appreciate you making the time to check in with us and join us for the show. I hope you have a great week this week. I hope you have some great weather. It's relaxing for you. Hope you get a sewing project in. And we'll see you again this Sunday at 7 p.m. Central Time. Bye, everybody. Happy sewing.